Hey, this is Timmy, and this is Rivers of the Mind. Before we get started, I want to say, as always, that this show is not meant to encourage the illicit use of LSD or any other drug. For the interests of harm reduction, I'll also mention that LSD does not cause a permanent trip or lasting insanity in people who are not already predisposed to mental illness. All events portrayed in this series are strictly fictional, and any resemblance to actual events is coincidental. With all of that said, here is the 7th episode of Rivers of the Mind, entitled Locked Out. As I watched Meagan tuck the tourmaline crystal that I had given her into her purse, her eyes bloodshot and anxious, I reached out into her mind and tried to speak. Wait, Meagan, don't leave. I know that this sounds weird, but please, you might be able to help me. She gulped. Great, now she was hearing voices. Listen, you aren't crazy, I tried to reassure her. The guy in the field right now who's screaming at the cows is named Mick, and I got trapped inside of his head trying to convince him to take better care of his dad. When I pulled him into my head like I did to your manager, I couldn't talk sense into him. I sent him back into his body, but part of his mind got left behind inside of me. It was his self-control. I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. I got thrown out of my body. And now he's trying to kill his family. His dad doesn't want to call the police because he thinks he can still talk sense into his son. And his wife's hiding in a spare bedroom with his kids. And the field is full of psychedelic mushrooms. And they're trying to use an ancient ritual to punish Mick for stabbing a cow in the eye. Meagan got out of the car. She could indeed see the ring of cows. They were almost stampeding around the house, making the ground shake as they did. And it was strange. She stepped closer to the field. The mushrooms recognized her at once.
We communed many times with the monkey who now enters the field. She is wise.
You stole mushrooms from this field, didn't you? I asked. Biting her lip nervously, she nodded. The mushrooms reached out to her. She felt their strange language flood a deep part of her mind in the form of a muffled noise and an odd sensation of wonder. She watched with stupefaction as the cows circled further out into the field, disappearing behind the house before they charged towards Mick. 2 big cows slammed into him and pushed him to the ground. Then 4 other cows came and clamped down over his wrists and ankles with their mouths to carry him away. The rest of the herd followed. Up above, the portal that they had opened in the sky swelled with blue tongues of fire and a strange black vapor. Mortified, Gerry sprang out of the house and fired his shotgun into the air, shouting for the cows to stop. Deeply saddened to see him upset, the herd looked back, turning around and lowering their heads. Suddenly, they were torn between the lords of the field, who had guarded them for so long, and their caretaker, whose voice they so loved. The mushrooms feared that if Gerry had been too hurt by the punishment they wielded against his son, that the old man would not return to sing to their flock. There was nothing worse that they could imagine. The old man once again abandoning the kind buffalo to the crushing loneliness of the barren pasture, alone to watch steel monsters clamber down the long flat boulder behind the metal sticks with their sharp vines, longing for the old man's sweet voice to touch their ears. With the added feeling of guilt, no longer could the kind buffalo imagine themselves as victims. No, now the kind buffalo would have offended him and driven him off and condemned themselves to a life without music. The mushrooms reached out to me.
Friend of the Old One, please speak to the bald monkey who lives in the brick abomination and explain to him the situation. Explain that we have opened the gates of the underworld to set his son's soul from trial, and that after 7 moons have passed, he will awaken.
I did as told, and I spoke to Gerry. He furrowed his brow.
Goddamn mushrooms sure as hell have some presumption. You know what? I've had enough of you. I'm gonna have a landscaper come, and he's gonna dig y'all up if you don't shut your yappers and mind your own damn business.
Mushrooms were saddened.
He makes noises of confusion. Perhaps he can invite him to commune with us. Tell him that we offer him our fruit. We'll bring death of the mind and 1,000 kisses of light as he is reborn into ecstasy.
I don't know if that message is going to get through to him.
And what do you recommend? Does one in the brick abomination not desire to know the mysteries of death?
Can I try something? The mushroom stood idly by and waited. I reached out to Gerry's mind. He was righteously pissed the hell off and wanted the mushrooms off his property if they were going to act like they owned the place and make the cows go all crazy. But he was also worried his son was having a stroke, and now his cows were probably making it worse by attacking him. Okay, listen, I know the mushrooms come off a little strong, but here's what happened. I was talking to Mick and I could tell something was off about him. I know you've seen it for a while. He's been eating the wrong food every day. It turns out he's cheating on Cassandra, embezzling money from the bank, and using his position to take revenge on people. I tried to talk some sense into him, but he wouldn't listen. He almost killed me. I pushed him out of my mind, and part of him got stuck. It was his ability to fake. He had this whole construct of a decent person in his mind, and because it was so disconnected from who he really is, it got dislodged and stuck in my body. Now, I'm trapped outside.
Slow down, son. I'm 87 years old, for Christ's sake. Now, what's got the cows acting all screwy?
Gerry, Mick stabbed one of the cows in the eye, and he wants to kill Cassandra.
Okay, have the cows, bring him over here, and let me talk to him, okay?
Gerry,
I am not gonna let some high and mighty mushrooms tell me how to live my life.
Meagan listened to Gerry and I converse from inside of the brush, only hearing one side of the conversation. An old man seemingly talking to a field of psychedelic mushrooms and an invisible voice in the air. She thought it was bizarre, but oddly amusing. She froze as the cows presented Mick's twitching and flailing body to Gerry in a parade up to the porch. Panting and in agony from the strain put on his limbs by the cows and the portal opened by the mushrooms, Mick groaned.
Son, come on, why don't you just sit down and talk to me? It sounds like you've been
Mick spat at his father and growled under his breath. Gerry frowned, gulping, afraid that I was right.
I'm gonna kill you!
Screamed Mick, creeping towards Gerry. Gerry backed up slowly, his face awash with agony.
Listen, son, I know you're,
He didn't know what to say. He really didn't know what was happening to his son, only that all this was certainly not something that surprised him. He froze in disbelief, holding up his hands and trying to find words to reason with Mick. In a desperate bid to protect him, I swung my astral body against his hands as hard as I could, knocking them to the side. Just as I did, Meagan jumped out from the brush, a rock clutched in her hand, which she swung against Mick's ear. It bloodied and he fell down to the ground, dropping his weapon. The cows mooed in admiration. Meagan was brave, the mushrooms thought.
Get inside.
she urged Gerry, taking him by the shoulder and helping him in.
Who the hell are you?
I'm John's friend. I'm here to help.
As they made their way up the steps, Mick regained his balance and charged back at them. Terrified, I lifted the knife from the grass where he dropped it and uncertainly waved it in front of him. Mick stopped in shock as the tip of the blade skimmed his forehead. "Let go of her," I commanded, in a voice that pressed in on every side of his psyche. Gerry looked back at him and fumed with rage, deeply betrayed and wounded. He shouted back at the field. "Fine! You have it your way! Do your worst!" he said to the mushrooms. The cows grabbed Mick by his arms and legs again and carried him off down the field in a long line. Meagan followed Gerry into the house as he mumbled something about discipline. Shaking, Cassandra peeked her head out of the door as Gerry stormed in. Had she really heard what she thought she'd heard? Her husband threatening to kill his own father? Her entire world was unraveling. Everything that she thought that she knew. Something demonic must have been happening. She knew it since that drugged-up homeless guy, Joe or John or whoever, staying in Gerry's house was still rocking back and forth by the wall, acting all possessed. The cows had been stampeding around the field, and they must have known something was afoot. She wished for a moment that she was not impure. That her prayers could mean something, but she knew that they never did. Her mind was too corrupt. Somehow, this was all her fault. She just couldn't find the words to say it. Meagan surveyed the room quickly as she walked in, glancing over the artwork and the furniture with curiosity.
I'm Meagan. I'm sorry to...
No.
Cassandra said, gulping as she tried not to look at Meagan too closely.
He didn't hurt you, did he? I don't have any idea what's come over him.
Meagan approached Cassandra softly, not letting any of her anxiety peer through her poised and confident exterior.
I'm fine. Are you okay?
She choked back tears.
No, I don't know what's going on.
Meagan put her hand on Cassandra's shoulder.
It's okay. Let it out. We're going to get it figured out. Have you called the police?
No, I can't have Mick going to prison or losing his job. He...
Meagan bit her lip, grimacing. She'd been thrust into this situation and it was above her pay grade. But she felt a compulsion to stay and to help her.
Breathe,
she told Cassandra. Tears started coming from Cassandra's face as Meagan led her to the couch, flicking off the TV. Cassandra caught the smell of weed coming off of Meagan and wrinkled her nose. But nonetheless, she appreciated having someone to talk to. Floating inside, I watched the pair briefly begin to discuss the crisis at hand before I slinked into the room where my physical body lay crouched in a fetal position, overwhelmed by the rush of psychedelic emotions and crippling awareness of the universe at large. I settled like a tiny storm on the ground, seeing my wide purple astral form barely move tiny pieces of dust as it rotated. I focused my energy onto my body, reaching up to its skull with tongues of energy to make the persona glance up and look my way. Head trembling and eyes bloodshot and panicked, my physical body looked up at me, mouth gaping. It could see me there on the floor, and it recognized me as well. Please, let me out of here, it said, clawing its face with its hands. I can't stay again anymore. Just don't make me go back to him. It's difficult to exist, I suppose, when you're used to being pretend. But I imagine it was hard to give it up, too. Feeling him slowly lose resistance, I pulled the persona from my body, seeing it emerge in a thick gray water before it solidified into what looked like a glass Mardi Gras mask. Having freed my body from its other occupant, I slowly returned into my own head. Being suddenly anchored to the physical felt surreally new. As my new soul connected with my brain and my brain connected with my body, I immediately missed being that spinning cloud of energy. I felt contained and almost imprisoned now. I stood up and saw, with worry, Mick's persona grow fainter and fainter, sobbing as it did so. I couldn't let it die. No, I couldn't give it a taste of existence and then just leave it to die here in this room. I pulled it back towards me, feeling it regain a sense of light.
I don't know how you do it,
the persona said.
It was really terrifying. There are so many images and thoughts running through my mind all the time. I just couldn't bear it.
I wiped a tear from the persona's eye. It takes practice. Don't be too hard on yourself.
What are you gonna do to me now? Am I going to die?
I don't know, I said. Hope not. A million different ideas raced through my head all at once. Maybe I could put him in a lamp, I thought, and he could be a genie. Maybe I could just keep him in my head and he could be my friend. Maybe I could give him to the cows. Or maybe the mushrooms will let him join them. Holding the persona carefully next to my head, I looked around the room.
What are you doing?
I don't know where I should put you, but I don't want you to disintegrate. Just then, I had an idea. I slipped out of the room and I made my way to the window. Meagan and Cassandra looked at me with confusion. I took the topaz crystal down from the curtain rod and I dangled it in front of me. Focusing my energy, I tried to break the persona down. It screamed as I wound and curled and strung it out into what looked like a brilliant white string, as thin as the hair on my head. A stream that orbited me in a fluid and manic frenzy. I concentrated intently on the center of the crystal, shooting the wild and chaotic ray of energy into the translucent blue gemstone. The persona flowed between the spaces in the molecular structure of the crystal like water flooding through 1,000 dried-out rivers. The persona was preserved. It stretched to the very edge of the rock before tapering down and glowing with a pale light. I hung the crystal back on the window, peering inside to watch persona dream.
Are you done now?
Meagan asked. Cassandra's eyes shot up at her and then darted back to me suspiciously. What a weird question to ask. Now? Yeah, now I am. Gerry looked up from the kitchen table where he'd poured himself a cup of coffee and now sat staring at his phone. He couldn't believe any of it was true. Cassandra stood up and stomped towards me.
What the hell happened to Mick?
He... Gerry gulped, thinking he could explain.
Johnny, he found out that Mick was...
He stopped himself, doubling back to look at me for validation.
What?
Meagan stood up an inch closer to us, cautiously. Cassandra, I said, unsure of myself as I looked into her mind. She looked at me, her eyes trembling and her face streaked with tears. Her anger had been building up, and it needed somewhere to go. Normally she could find somewhere productive to channel it. With her Bible study friends, for instance. Maybe she could channel it towards the gays or the liberals or the illegals. When she was at home, alone, she'd channel it into the television. She could only direct her anger at herself for so long before it overflowed. Our eyes locked with one another. She froze still, and I felt myself become at once conscious of her thoughts, her breathing, and her heart rate. It felt familiar to her. She tugged away, and so I pressed outward with my consciousness, enveloping her more assertively. I found myself more gentle than before, having been made aware of the intricacies of any one mind, and the damage that could be done to myself and others by simply yanking or shoving as I saw fit. Having spent so long inside my body, I could see the energetic aspects of my soul, to which I'd previously been unaware, shooting from my skin like little flares, the exhaust of tiny nerve endings, along with the formation of what looked like planetary rings around my vision. Our two psyches locked and began to tug against one another in a dizzying spiral of centrifugal motion. I felt the terrain on which we both stood sway and spin. We brushed against each other's minds like the ends of magnets. Carefully and almost surgically, I dug through her mind to uncover layers of thoughts and memories she had laid hidden underneath her psyche. She looked up with awe as they danced around her like a psychic constellation. I tugged at the pieces of her mind, trying to urge her to pray. She frowned at me, confused. I urged her again, and she did so, reciting the Lord's Prayer under her breath. The frames through which the words trickled appeared entirely visible as they climbed and climbed into the ultimate. I knew not what she saw, only that she felt a wave of compassion for herself overtake her. The memories, in their unsteady and dissonant layers, shivered. Somehow, even if everything she believed in told her that she should hate herself, she could suddenly see that the universe was at peace with her. She was loved as she was there in that exact second, one which felt timeless. She tried to reason about it. I gently held her still and urged her to let go of any attempts to explain it. As she did, the layers of memories and momentary feelings of shame floated away like tiny balloons. Her eyes shut. She smiled. As I pulled away from her mind, she sat there and stared placidly at the ceiling. Gerry frowned and scratched his head. Meagan had taken a seat next to him, and he was explaining the situation as she listened intently. Apparently, the old man said his son wasn't any good. He'd always had a suspicion.
I guess if he's really done something that's so bad that the cows and the mushrooms are teaming up to teach him a lesson, maybe I shouldn't bail him out this time. I mean, he's not 16 anymore. If he offends some kind of psychedelic spirit or whatever, he needs to be an adult and suffer the consequences, But I just figure after all the ballyhoo the cows have been putting down on him, I really feel like I should call the ambulance.
Maybe the stress has just got to Mick.
Cassandra looked down at the table.
Don't give him an out. Call the fucking police.
Gerry looked up at her with shock, glancing with suspicion at me.
Oh, go ahead. Act like you're so fucking surprised to hear me say that.
Mom said a bad word, thought the three kids, almost as one, who in the midst of this crisis had taken up the iPad. They almost always did this when Mom and Dad fought. Cassandra snatched the phone from the table and dialed 911. Gerry almost stopped her before he resigned to let things happen as they would. There was no use enabling his son. He suspected that I told Cassandra that Mick had cheated. And he knew, if nothing else, that hell has no wrath like a woman's scorn. And there is no use in being an enabler. I should check on him, though, I said. Gerry looked up and gulped. He felt guilty, but didn't want to budge. He just wanted to stay there. His soul, and his heart, and his body all turned to stone. He became a statue, solemn and unmoved, clutching his hands together and sitting still just as he had when Gavin came out to him and Miranda took his side. There's no way to cure him when he got like this. He could stew for months over a grudge,
I'll come with you.
Meagan said, standing up. The two of us hurried to the door and went outside.
What's happening with the cows?
Meagan asked.
Hell, what's happening with everything?
I really didn't know how to explain it. Well, the mushrooms are upset. That's it. Yeah. We walked past a cluster of them. They sparkle with a vague purple glow. But in their reality, I knew that much more was happening. Meagan raised her eyebrows.
Those mushrooms, huh?
She smirked.
Guess the cops are coming through, otherwise I'd pick some.
I stared vacantly. Yeah, I focused my attention from the awkward conversation over to where the cows had formed a circle around Mick's flailing body.
What are they doing?
It's a gate to Shibolba, I guess. Something. I stared up at the looming void which they had torn into the sky, realizing that this entire ordeal would be greatly simplified if Meagan could simply see what I was seeing. I turned to face her. Our eyes locked and our consciousnesses pooled fluidly. Holding her still, I reached for the part of her brain which remembered with great nostalgia having taken mushrooms. I summoned the feeling from her mind, reducing the walls between dream and reality in her brain, unleashing a chemical flood. Her stomach immediately sank. The colors around her flashed into a vibrant spectrum, like a camera scanning through filters, as her senses took on a wider and more expansive flare.
Holy shit! What the hell did you just do?
This'll make it easier. It's hard to explain when you're not tripping.
I'm going insane, I swear. Holy...
She held up her hand in front of her face, twisting it around and delighting in its distorted proportions.
This is crazy!
She said. The ground around her appeared to shift into a twisting and intricate knot pattern. The life around her breathed and cried out to her. Before she could run into the field and answer the urge to dance, I gripped her by the arm. She laughed at me as she saw how gravely serious I looked. The mushrooms noticed that she had joined them and called out to us, telling us that it was the perfect time. Overwhelmed with awe, Meagan looked up at the sky.
Behold!
Roared the lords of the field. Trembling, we both stared up into the void. It called out to us, shivering with a sterile and black emptiness. All of the cows, pulsing with energy, provided harmony to the softly singing mushrooms in the field, contorting into a cosmic hymn. A wave of crackling energy sparkled across the exposed night sky, rippling against the stars like water. Cracks appeared, like melting ice, as down from the vortex came 1,000 tiny tongues of fire, each one with the surface like a tornado. Meagan's mouth hung open. She touched her face as she tried to reconnect with some sense of reality, feeling herself teeter into the emptiness above. Her thoughts raced just as fast as mine. I couldn't keep up. Our brains were spinning like two galaxies, feeding off of one another. A deep anxiety shattered the initial feeling of wonder, and I found myself gripping for her hand. She stared back at me, looking profoundly disturbed. A memory hung before us. The crack in the universe. They were doing it again. The two of us contemplated stopping the mushrooms, but how could we put it to words? The lords of the field could not be questioned. We moved closer to the ritual at a glacial pace. The world around us seemingly melting into a great and chaotic river of molten prairies and power lines. The air pulsed around us in circuits, flashing in an intricate binary. The cows bled into one solid circle, in the midst of which was a soul, burning like a 5-spoked wheel that turned and turned against the tide, rising up towards the twisting body of nothingness and existence colliding. Mick's mind was slurped up like spaghetti, flopping and contorting against the 1,000-tongued tornado as it dragged him into Shibolba, the place of fear. He was gone, but it was not over. The two of us waited in patient agony, adrift in a solid stucco sea of polygons and shimmering energies. Our minds had spread into living machines which ran against each other and fed pulses of light into one another's wires, jitters of motion between gears. We stared up into the sky as the cows dispersed, leaving the comatose body of Mick breathless in the field. A bright blue crack appeared in the depths of the void. All life, just for one moment, paused. Meagan and I looked at one another knowingly. The beyond. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Rivers of the Mind. My name is Timmy Vilgiate. I wrote, produced, and scored this episode, as well as playing John, Mick, and Gerry. Kyla Valenti actually came to Colorado Springs from Michigan and played Meagan. Ray Yost played the part of Cassandra, and Cameron Mayfield played the part of the Psilocybe mushrooms. As always, if you enjoyed our show, please consider going on to Patreon and pledging money to help keep us afloat. Music for this episode was all actually written and composed by me. Heavenly Blue was the song that started playing at the end, only I slowed it down 20 times. And the other song in the beginning was sort of just a prepared guitar piece. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great night, and we hope to see you again next week. Hello, this is John. Are you concerned about interdimensional anomalies and the threat they could pose to your house? Well, I know you are because I can read your mind, so don't even try to pretend like you aren't. Okay? Well, if you're concerned like me and many other Americans, maybe you can consider investing in Beyond Protect. It is well, really, it's actually just some mushrooms, and you can plant them in like a little pot, and as long as you don't pick them, they just stay there, and I don't know where you can put them anywhere. It's totally legal. You can just tell them, you're not going to eat them. They're just there to protect from the beyond. Yeah. So if you just go on to beyondprotect.com and you just it's I guess it's only on the dark web now. So just go there and tell them John sent you. Except don't do that, please.